I want to talk to you this morning about imagining success through failure and the importance of that to our society and indeed societies right across the world. So I'm going to begin, as every good story begins, with the words, once upon a time. Once upon a time there was a little boy called Paddy Johnston. He was from Derry, became a teenager, went to St Columb's College, a renowned school here in Northern Ireland, and he failed science 3 years in a row. Every single year. His mother and father would say, you've got to work harder, you've got to study harder. Didn't make any difference. He failed. His mother went to a parent-teacher meeting when he was about 15, and she happened to mention to his form teacher that Patrick was thinking about doing medicine. The form teacher said, you must be joking. Well, that little boy went on to University College Dublin to do medicine 4 years later. And then he went to the United States to develop cancer programs and develop himself as a cancer researcher. And then came back to Northern Ireland. And today, of course, I'm Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University, Belfast. Of course, I didn't know I was going to be Vice-Chancellor of Queen's University, Belfast when I was 14, but the important point here is every step of the way was about failure, was about embracing failure and seeing that on the path to success. No matter what I did, whether it was as a medical student, whether it was as a teenager, whether it was as a doctor, whether it was in forming companies out of my research, or indeed even today, I continue to fail in order to succeed. Who present in the audience has never failed? Great. So you all have. If you haven't failed, in actual fact, you haven't lived. And actually, one of the really important aspects of failure, real failure is not trying. That's what real failure is. And experiencing failure, understanding failure, is absolutely critical to actually developing you, your talent base, your impact on society, and indeed society itself. Now, I'm sure you'll all agree that the ancient art of begrudgery is alive and well in Ireland. It's been here for many centuries, and it's something you'll recognise. In 1770, Dr. Samuel Johnston wrote to the Bishop of Killaloe, having spent a month with him on vacation, about the Irish, and he said, you know, the Irish are a very fair people. They never speak well of each other. And in case you think that era and that type of culture has actually left us, Bono, about 4 years ago, in an interview with the New York Times, was asked the question, how would you define the caricature of someone in Ireland versus the US? And he said, well, in the US, if somebody's successful, you actually want to try and emulate that individual, or you want to achieve what they've done. In Ireland, if you're successful, we want to cut the legs off you. And that actually, I'm sure, resonates with all of you in the audience, that there is some truth in that. But of course, the real challenge in that is that that art of begrudgery has major societal outcomes. Number one of those is actually that we as a society don't talk about failure. We love to talk about success, but we actually don't embrace the idea and notion that it's okay to fail. In actual fact, it's far, far more important, because if we don't have that discussion, then rather than developing a prosperous society, and I'm not talking about economically prosperous, I'm talking about a dynamic, innovative, entrepreneurial society, we actually then become obstructive. We become defensive. We become complacent. And we begin to stagnate. But more importantly, society itself begins to plateau. And it plateaus around the level of competency. And it misses the opportunity to really develop itself and grow to real excellence and embrace entrepreneurism and innovation. A setting where you don't know the answers to the questions you're asking or the risks you're necessarily taking. Somebody who knew a lot about failure, surprisingly, possibly to you, was Albert Einstein. He was a genius, a Nobel laureate, and somebody who changed thinking in physics and maths right across the whole world. Albert Einstein in 1895 failed his entrance exams, his matriculation exams, to the University of Lausanne in Switzerland. He couldn't actually get in. And he's quoted as saying that a person who has never made a mistake never actually tried anything new. And I think there's an awful lot of truth to that. If you're always successful, you're actually doing things you know the answer to. If you're taking risk, if you're going into a zone where you don't know the answer, but you've done your homework, then you may fail, but as long as you go at it the right way, then you are more likely to be successful. Albert Einstein is also quoted as saying that all that is valuable in society depends on the opportunity for development, but it has to start with the individual. That opportunity, of course, is the context. It's what society wants. But in the absence of the individual stepping into that zone where they're going to challenge, it ain't going to happen. It's very similar to nuclear fusion. In nuclear fusion, you have atoms, when they collide together and form a larger atom, they release huge energy. There's a codependency there in relationship to achieving that. And that action, that fusion, then delivers something else. And very similarly in society, by coming together in a concerted way, being very deliberate and strategic interactions, we as individuals, by working with others, can actually bring about changes that we at one stage would have thought unimaginable. Let me tell you my story and my journey through cancer, because it is a story of failure. It began in 1983. I was a resident doctor, a senior house officer in a hospital in the south of Ireland. I was taking care of a 15-year-old boy with a very advanced Ewing's sarcoma. I suddenly realized in taking care of this boy how little I knew about cancer, how little I knew about what we needed to actually do for him. And I also recognized that not just I, but indeed the medical and nursing profession looking after him were struggling. We didn't talk about it. It was failure. We didn't even use the word cancer. We had every euphemism under the sun. The poor child was actually largely abandoned by his family because they also couldn't deal with this. And our care patterns for cancer were completely rudimentary. That failure on my part, that inadequacy on my part, spurred me to actually then move and take the risk of failing in order to succeed in cancer care. And so I went to the United States with my wife and family in 1987 to do a clinical specialty that largely did not exist in the United Kingdom or Ireland, called medical oncology. I went to the National Cancer Institute, which was the world leader and still is in cancer medicine in Bethesda, Maryland, shown here. And there I actually learned how to really take risk. I was there for 9 years, taking risk in doing things for cancer patients in a way that even I wouldn't have thought possible. I had great mentors and leaders, and some of who are now still great mentors and friends at this juncture, to mentor me, and these are world leaders in cancer, both from Europe and also from the United States. And what they taught me was the importance of integrating clinical and scientific knowledge together in order to break through boundaries and to start off with the question that you didn't know the answer to, but actually at the end of the day, as long as you went about it the right way, the benefits to patients were going to be very significant. One of the projects, major project that I did over that 9 years was on the work of Charlie Heidelberger, who had developed a drug back in the 1950s called fluorouracil, the most commonly used cancer drug today. I developed a number of tests to actually discriminate those patients who truly benefited from that drug, particularly in GI cancers and also in breast cancer. And thus began the era of personalized medicine, and this is now 1992, and now here we are over 20 years later, really beginning to embrace this as the new era of medicine. But what it taught me was that by integrating knowledge around the understanding of a very difficult disease, bringing that together with understanding how it affected people and patients, bringing those two things together, that my clinical practice and how I approached patients would stay fresh, innovative, and indeed the patients themselves would become part of that discovery. 10 years on, 1996, I returned to Northern Ireland and to Belfast with the mandate to actually build a cancer programme here in Northern Ireland and a cancer centre. What I did was I immediately reached out to the international community and brought them here to Belfast. A lot of them thought I was nuts. Coming to Belfast in 1996 to build a global cancer centre? All my mentors went, "Paddy, you're crazy." Not a single one of them would say that today. Why? Because they actually became part of the journey. They came to Belfast and they started to understand immediately when they were here why I had come home. Because there was an opportunity to make a real difference for people's lives, incorporating a lot of the lessons that I had learned through failure over the previous decade. We also brought a wider international panel and signed an international agreement in 1999, unheard of, with the Department of Health in the United States and in the South and in the North together. And it's shown here in one of the pictures, chaired by Senator Mitchell, who at that time, of course, had just brought us through the Good Friday Agreement. And many other people came around this whole notion of cancer being something we never talked about as a society, indeed bringing us together as human beings to think together, work together to actually try and conquer an evil as we might perceive it in some way, but something that needed to be cured and needed to be treated. And we had people like Sir Alan MacLay, Quentin Coey, who's Chief Executive of Belfast City Hospital, Etta Campbell, who in society here really gave great leadership behind the scenes and encouragement to me. But we had many failures in that journey. But 10 years later, in 2006, we opened the Cancer Centre here in Northern Ireland, not just as a cancer centre for Northern Ireland, but one that was actually now globally transplanted, one that was actually working with colleagues all over the world. Other countries such as Singapore and Jordan had actually come looking to see, how did Belfast do this? We want to learn from that. And of course today, we now have that marriage of clinical and scientific research going on every day of the week, and indeed at weekends. We now have drugs that have been developed in Belfast that are now in patients being trialled as we speak. And we also have developed new tools and new companies here in Northern Ireland, and indeed have companies coming into Northern Ireland to develop themselves because of the expertise that now sits there. That has led to a much wider development, the Health Sciences Campus, with over 1,000 scientists now employed by the university, actually on the Belfast City Hospital site, working in diseases such as respiratory medicine, infectious disease, diabetes, blindness, as well as cancer, renal medicine. And those patients, particularly in the City Hospital, are all being treated, have access to new treatments and clinical trials as part of their care. More importantly, there's an eco-culture around health that's now developed that actually reaches out right across the world and is giving us a reputation, bar none, not only in the UK, across Europe and elsewhere. But most important is there are now hundreds of patients in Northern Ireland alive today because of what we've done. And because we experienced failure after failure on the path to success. And I was very proud in 2012 to receive a Diamond Jubilee Award, one of only 20 that Her Majesty gave out in her Diamond Jubilee year, recognising the impact of what had happened here in cancer services. Now, the reason that I'm showing you that is to really look at what are the key lessons around failure if you're going to succeed. And the first of those is dismissing the fear of failure. Get rid of it. Learn to constantly adapt, because you're going to have elements of failure on any journey. You have to have a clarity of vision, a passion and a commitment. Do not go into something half-hearted. If you do, you're a fool. If you're going to make something transformative, something that actually grows, you're going to have to commit to it and invest yourself in it. The importance of leadership and teamwork is absolutely critical, because teamwork is what's going to deliver this. It's not an individual, it's back to that nuclear fusion. And don't forget the importance of mentorship and international networks. None of us, absolutely none of us, particularly me, knows all the answers. And there will be others that you need to reach to find those answers. So embracing those types of concepts, can we imagine a Northern Ireland? A Northern Ireland as a global centre of innovation and entrepreneurism? Well, if we can, it's something we should aspire to for our children's and our grandchildren's sake. But to get there, we can't get there, as Einstein says, by continuing to do the things that have actually got us to where we are now. We've got to begin to think differently. We are very good at investing in buildings. We are not good at investing in our people. Indeed, we export our talent at the age of 18. 35 to 40% of our brightest kids leave our shores at the age of 18, and under 30% of them ever come back. You cannot become a globally competitive society when you do that. We now have an opportunity. The Northern Ireland Programme for Government will actually be coming forward over the next 3 months. That's a real opportunity for us as a society to really begin to embrace success through failure, to really stand up and say what we want to be known for, and start to invest together in our young people in a way that we have never done before. We also have to do that in partnership with business community and with our universities, and a world-class university in particular like Queen's, one of the top 1% of universities in the world. Number 1 in the UK this year for developing financial return from intellectual innovation, and one of the most internationally connected universities in the world, number 9 internationally. So we have some of the great seeds for success, but it's going to be about a very dedicated strategic partnership. It's that context that Einstein talked about. If the context is right, the dream can be very big, and embrace failure on the way to success. Working from the executive, through our business and investment community, through our universities, and of course our higher education system to bring about that innovative society. If we do that, our children will be in a place where we will be world class, where we will be entrepreneurial and known as such, in areas such as financial services, cybersecurity, drug development, food safety, and possibly social justice and the whole art world. And that might seem like a foreign dream to you today, or a far-off dream. The reality is the building blocks for all of those are in place today. We just have to have the conviction and embrace the idea of failing on the way to success. I will finish my talk on imagining success with failure with a couple of quotes from Winston Churchill and Nelson Mandela. Success consists of going from failure to failure without the loss of enthusiasm. And also, success itself is not final. Failure is not fatal. It's the courage to continue that really counts. But I think Nelson Mandela's quote is a great one to close on this morning. And that is, it always seems impossible until it's done and it's ended. Thank you very much.